how do you pronounce your name? Your full name?
Yang, Yang, just Yang.
Okay. You're in the New York City area, and you're a Zoomer, and so you couldn't have been operating for long. Do you want to kind of give a brief background and maybe where your writings appear?
Yeah. So I've been kind of writing for about a year now. I would say a little over a year. Started on Substack. Just was really pretty disillusioned with the way events were moving, and so I'm 24 now. So it was about like 22, 23. I'm like just graduate from college, and it's like I just felt disillusioned with how the world was. So I started writing about it. I started, just talking about politics, culture, society, religion, sociology, anthropology, that kind of thing. And then I started getting published in like Tablet, got published in the Free Press and Unheard, a couple of other different publications, still write on Substack. So yeah. What about you?
Yeah, I've been a kind of an observer and writer on politics for a long time. In the last few years, I've stopped writing so much and just kind of pivoted to this interview thing. It's easier to do, for one, to talk than to write. Plus, I've got to now that I'm much further into adulthood, I've had to make some trade-offs and just start concentrating on working. So that cut into writing time. But I've been in outlets like Splice Today, the Center Square. I used to write for a little Silicon Valley political-oriented online, well, not online mag, I don't know if I call it that. Anyway, it was called Politics with an X. And it's a little funny now because Matt Iglesias has something with the same spelling. Kind of easy.
I thought it was called Slow Board or something. Matt Iglesias's publication.
Yeah, he's got something, I think, for the election year 2024 called Politics. He might be collaborating with somebody on that. But yeah, I was involved in libertarianism in the 2000s, and I interned at the Independent Institute. And it's interesting to see, politics kind of pivot away from that kind of libertarian or classical liberal and start becoming much more kind of, on the right, that is, much more culturally oriented and nationalistic under the way
after Trump. Yes, after Trump. Yes.
Yeah.
Were you ever part of the whole like new atheist movement, or?
Yeah, that was pretty hot back in the 2000s, and it seemed a bit kind of off topic or orthogonal to my kind of libertarian leanings then. So in other words, I was very much focused on like political economy and things like that. But yeah, I wasn't involved with new atheists, but I did contribute to a website with Razib Khan and John Derbyshire and Heather McDonald called Secular Right, writing under pseudonyms. And this was
because that was interesting because you on your bio you had something about like how you were part of some like conservative atheist group or something.
Yeah. The kind of naturalistic right, and that I think the last time.
What does naturalistic mean? You mean like natural law? Because that's a very theological concept.
No, I mean like in the Darwinian term, natural.
Right. So like more like the whole like evolutionary psychology stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Like Jeffrey Miller, Diana Fleischman, that kind of thing.
They're an interesting pair.
They're not just a pair, but yeah.
What was that?
They're not just a pair. They're poly. So.
Yeah.
Which I think I talked about this. Poly is like the next big thing all the outlets are talking about right now for some reason. I saw that. I read that. Yeah. I saw an article in the New Yorker last month about polyamory, and then the New York Times published one, and then New York Magazine published one. So that's like three, like the three big New York, outlets all published articles on polyamory around the same time. It's like I'm pretty sure it's because all these journalists like go to all their events and then they just talk about the same thing. It shows up on everyone's publications.
Yeah, so I remember when polyamory was, it's always sort of been in the background there, but I think the term they used to use was swingers. Given a polish and turned into something more ideological, something that you could almost kind of formally explicate. And so, and a term like polycule, I'd never even heard that. That seems genuinely new. But swingers, open marriage. That's all.
Well,
It
a
seems like
couple things I have to say about that.
in the
Yeah,
70s. In the 70s, it was a thing, right? At least
there's a couple things I want to say about that. I feel like swingers is more like a married couple thing, where it's like you're a husband and wife, and then you like trade partners. But polyamory is more like there's like it's like a web instead of like a dyad. It's like an entire web of people. That's how I see poly, as opposed to swinging. And I think you're very right that it's more of a it's kind of like a, if you're in this sort of identity, like if you're a leftist, you're basically expected to be poly at this point. Like it's a political expectation, not just a way to be in a relationship.
Yeah, I guess it says something about your not being possessive. It's kind of like this chill disposition they
I
expect.
think what it mostly says is this idea of liberation, right? Like, because left movements all rely on the word liberation, like liberation from this, liberation from that. So, okay, well, you have black liberation and you have like gay liberation, and now it's like people are this idea that people are trapped by monogamy, and it's restricting people, and therefore you need to be liberated by going to polygamy or polyamory. It's this idea of being unshackled by norms that you considered like a part of a power hierarchy. It's like kind of like one of those everything is about power kind of things, like Foucault, Schmidt, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Weird to me, it seems to be mirroring the kind of dissolution of the labor market, and like the one good job you have for life. Now you juggle various jobs, and you have to have side hustles, and now that's been extended into the realm of relationships as well.
It's also a good point. Yeah, like you have Uber, and then it's like you work for Uber, you work for DoorDash, you work for all these gig jobs, and now you have like gig partners, you could say. It's the commodification of relationships. Everything. This is actually one of those points where both like the far right and the far left make, which is that like everything is kind of commodified. And I think that's a big reason why people have been turning against libertarianism, because it's like, oh yeah, all the market stuff, it kind of it tears at the fabric of societies. We keep talking about markets, but markets ignore the human elements, the community elements, and libertarianism is like the ultimate form of turning everything into a commodity. I think that's why people have shifted away from libertarianism.
Yeah, and if you were involved in libertarianism, they could count to you all the ways that we're like so far from libertarianism. They say, look at the amount of federal regulations issued every year, blah blah blah. The size of government, and Washington D.C. is responsible for more and more, and so they're sort of missing what people are complaining about when they call things libertarianism. They don't mean that it's kind of strictly libertarian in some kind of like serious political economic way. Although somewhat seriously politically, it's more of kind of a social, cultural thing that they're getting at, and that is just greater individual just in the space market and now romantic forces. You're just kind of adrift. You're alone. That's kind of what people mean when they say everything's got libertarian. It doesn't mean that Ron Paul is one.
Right. I mean, talking about social libertarianism, not economic libertarianism. I guess we could make the distinction between those two forms. Economic libertarianism is like the Chicago school. It's Brian Kaplan. That's economic libertarianism. Social libertarianism is like in the '60s, free love or something like that. It's so yeah, I guess there's like two forms, like find yourself, be your most authentic self, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it is interesting, and there's that documentarian or documentary filmmaker Adam Curtis. I don't even know if he's still alive, but he's over in Britain, and I've seen some of his work, and he noted the convergence of kind of a right-wing economism with left-wing individual liberation. And
I mean, that's what people call what neoliberalism, right? Neoliberalism is the dominant ideology of Western liberal democracies. It's what happened when we ended history in the 1990s.
Yeah, well, the term neoliberal, I remember, was firmly applied to question of economics overwhelmingly. The anti-globalization protests in the late '90s, and for whom neoliberalism was the target. I don't remember a huge social component to that, because mainly the social component was something a lot of progressives were for. Your individual.
Because that's interesting, because you used to hear all these like leftist complaints about globalization. It was like oh yeah, it's all the World Trade Organization, whatever. Now when people talk about globalization, it's mostly right wing people. So that shifted a lot.
Right. And that I mean the complete 180 on that is fascinating, and
Right.
I think there is, it kind of speaks to how sort of operationally reactionary everyone is now. Not capital R reactionary, not necessarily far right, but they're all sort of reacting to what the other side is doing, and I feel that significantly, the fact that the right ran with anti-globalization, the left had to go the other way, and so you have like outlets like Current Affairs saying yes, we're for open borders. I don't think they would have. The likes of those people would have said that 2 years before.
Well, here's what I think. I think it's that the left has changed to become, the left's main focus used to be economics. Now the left's main focus is social issues, and I think that's where the change lies. The left used to oppose globalization because they said, Bernie Sanders, for example, he said open borders is a Koch brothers policy because it lowers wages for workers, right? And now it's like, economic issues aren't really that big of a deal anymore. You hear a lot of leftists say, well, we can negotiate with you about tax cuts. We can be political about tax cuts, but you can't negotiate on trans people. You can't negotiate on trans rights because those are sacred. They don't really care about the economic stuff anymore. It's mostly about the social stuff that really matters to the left, and I think that's why you see the globalization discourse completely change. And the right too. The right, like people don't really care as much about the economic stuff on both sides. It's more complete culture war. The economics, that was kind of a Cold War relic when people were talking about communism and capitalism. Now that the Cold War is gone, social issues are kind of the main big thing.
It's interesting how much social issues have moved into territory previously occupied by economic considerations. So, the reason the left has become open borders is not because now they are free traders, but because, no one is illegal, quote unquote.
Right.
Like a kind of cultural vengeance for white settler colonialism or something. It's kind of like retaking, or, kind of a reconquering what has been conquered unjustly. It's just sort of a cultural, racially mediated, so some kind of Cesar Chavez point of view on what free labor markets could do to unions. That's simply the furthest thing from their mind now.
Yeah, it's I remember even a decade ago, the biggest thing was like what Scott Walker, like smashing labor unions or whatever, and that was like the big thing between right and left. And now it's like, who cares about unions? I mean, now it's like there's a sort of pro-union thing on the Republican Party now too, which would be impossible to even think about a decade ago when they were cheering on Scott Walker. And now it's like Josh Hawley is like, you know what? Unions are good for humans, are good for workers, and it's the woke corporations that we need to be fighting against. So we can see this sort of convergence of, like, the Republicans are moving in more of a kind of leftward on economics, and then the left is kind of not really caring about the economic stuff anymore. So it's kind of converging on economics while the social issues are the most political.
Yeah, operationally, of course, the Democratic Party still is the party of unions, and last
The
year,
party of it is.
and
But you can clearly see how like the Paul Ryan, you know, the Paul Ryan kind of Atlas Shrugged thing is just out, and the whole Josh Hawley stuff is coming in. The Marco Rubio stuff is coming in.
yeah, the right. You could feel it in their bones, though. They're not really that moved by the labor question. It's overwhelmingly cultural. I mean, when they complain about woke capital, people like Josh Hawley, notwithstanding, but when they complain about woke capital, it's about 90% woke and 10% capital.
Exactly.
So they're so we had this kind of realignment occurring, and then kind of the old issues about anti-globalization and all of that. We've seen some realignments on free speech and things like that. But in the last few months, weirdly, it seemed as if people are kind of returning to form. October 7th kind of took us back to a somewhat neocon style argumentative landscape.
But even foreign policy, that's also more social than economic. It's not like, oh yeah, it's about sending money to Israel or to Ukraine or whatever. It's also a question of like what side do you support, and that's also social rather than economic, because us sending money to other countries, it's not that big a part of our budget. It's so it still is more social than it is economic.
Yeah, I was kind of pivoting into a different kind of argument as far as talking point realignments and stuff. It's a little bit of a different subject, but yeah, that is. I mean,
well, what I'm arguing is that everything is about social issues now, pretty much everything. So
I think that's got a lot to do with just social media being the primary way a lot of people are getting news, visually oriented medium,
right.
Political symbolism.
Also, because economics are complicated, like anyone can talk about, oh yeah, can a man be a woman or whatever. It's hard to talk about like deregulation. It's hard to talk about, just like macro or microeconomics, looking at charts. People find that boring. No one wants to. Very few people want to like sit there and look at markets, look at charts. It's boring. But the culture war is always entertaining. Politics in this age is entertainment.
Yeah, if you're particularly good at assembling charts and picking those apart, you can get quite the following on social media. But the you have to be pretty good at it. You don't.
No. But even charts don't measure up to pure culture war stuff. Like,
well, no.
like if you show a chart, like lines go up and down, it's less visceral than like showing like a teenage girl with double mastectomy scars. That's visceral. That's what people want to talk about. People don't want to talk about, line goes up, line goes down.
Yeah, in the aggregate, people are more into that. Surely, yes, but
Yeah,
but for any individual on social media, there's a bigger payoff to taking the chart route, because a lot of people can post things about trans people or black versus white, blah blah blah. But collectively, yes, that has more sway over everyone's imagination and the cultural. And even cultural doesn't quite capture it. It has to be, very much driven by compelling aesthetics. It's video and image driven.
Right. I think I saw a tweet from you about how like conservatives are really bad at that, and I completely agree. Like when I look at conservative magazines, conservative websites, I have a copy of like of First Things just sitting on my table here. It's literally just the name of the magazine, the articles, and the authors written below. That's it. There's not even a picture on the cover. It's just text. And
so First Things, it looks more like an academic journal. Yeah, I've seen that, but it's a magazine. Yeah, but it looks like I'm familiar with. I had a mentor involved back in school, involved in the journal Critical Review, and First Things just kind of looked like the cover of Critical Review, some kind of quarterly journal or something. But yeah, it is a magazine, and so I see what you mean.
First Things is like, if you open it, it's like letters to the editor, and then it's like a bunch of articles, and then there's like reviews in the back, and then there's poetry. So it is supposed to be a magazine, but it looks like a journal from the front.
Yeah, it looks kind of like the New Criterion, which is an actual journal.
I thought the New Criterion was more of like an old arts and culture magazine. I just find a lot of like conservative aesthetics like I don't think that most people are like they're not visually stimulating basically, which makes sense because conservatism is more they're not willing to push the envelope or else they wouldn't be conservative if they were.
Yeah, if I'm trying to think of the most aesthetically oriented in some kind of compelling way version of conservatism, I mean, maybe something like um, Dadaism and fascism and futurism. It's about as I think those kind of images have been accepted as cool by outside groups,
Well,
left wing.
so those are right wing, but they're not conservative. That's the thing, though.
Okay, well, yeah.
Well, like for example, the
you can.
futurism stuff. So like Elon Musk, right? Like Elon Musk isn't really a conservative. He's right wing, but he's like a right wing progressive or a futurist. There was an article by N.S. Lyons.
Oh yeah,
On
I know.
yeah, it was called "The Rise of Right Wing Progressivism," where he talks
Yeah,
about this. Did you see that?
yeah, I did. Yeah, and we can. I guess what makes it remain right wing is the kind of core of lack of concern over equality.
Well, yeah, I mean, right wing thought. The
Sure.
word right wing, how I define it is if you care about like hierarchies, right? And left wing is you have to dismantle hierarchies. That's the only real difference
Right.
between
So
right and left. Yeah.
libertarianism, kind of like futuristic oriented, like blows the doors of perception wide open. Let's let capital and individuals just see what they can
Right.
possibly
So
achieve.
libertarianism is right wing, but it's not
And that
really
would be
conservative.
right. Well, I mean, right wing. Part of this is that so much is basically oriented around reference to the left. So
Sure, but
anything not left,
it's
anything
also a
not
very
left.
American thing to say that being right wing is connected explicitly to capitalism.
Well, capitalism would be the best example of a right wing that is not conservative in many ways.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Capitalism is progress, right? Like Adam Smith, those guys were all about progress. It was the Enlightenment. People were pushing things forward, and it's interesting if you look at American history. Most people that were, traditionalists, that were social conservatives, they weren't capitalists. They were anti-capitalists some of the time. William Jennings Bryan, one of the most famous populist demagogue kind of dudes, kind of Donald Trumpy in some ways. He was very conservative Christian, and he was against this. He was against capitalism. He wasn't really against capitalism, but he warned a lot against like the libertarian impulse. This idea that libertarianism is libertine, and it kind of destroys communities that a traditionalist Christian like Jennings Bryan would like.
Right. Someone like Samuel Gompers might be an example of someone who's sort of dispositionally or constitutionally conservative in their lifestyle choices, but he'd be anti-capitalist, not as much as an actual communist, but he was.
Right, and then you had the dudes like in the 70s, you had dudes like Christopher Lash also kind of stake out this position.
The left is reckoning with the rise of a right which is deviating from Koch brothers' philosophy, which you would think would be good to them, but unfortunately, from their point of view, they see it wedded to a much more severe social conservatism, and they're not willing to make that trade-off. So a lot of them are thinking of the Cato Institute people in the kind of cultural and economic libertarians as
Right.
so bad when up against the Trumpist right. They think they're even worse.
Because when I see like pro-immigration arguments being made by the left, you look at their sources. They say Cato Institute, Cato Institute, Cato Institute. So yeah,